The desert wind whipped Munira's veil, the thin fabric offering little protection from the stinging sand. She huddled closer to the rough wooden cart, her body aching from the long journey. Around her, the other women whispered. They did not speak to her, only about her. Cursed, one muttered. Ugly, hissed another. Munira lowered her head, her veiled face concealing the scars that had earned her these cruel names. She knew they spoke of the burns that marred her jaw and forehead, a permanent reminder of the fire that had stolen her family and her childhood. Their destination was a fortress city rising from the heart of the desert, its stone walls shimmering in the relentless sun. This was the home of Sheikh Nasir, the man she was to marry. She was not a willing bride, but a possession, sold to him like a camel or a bolt of silk. Vizier Farhan, a man whose smile never reached his eyes, had arranged the sale. He had called her a gift, a bride for the sheikh. But Munira knew she was a pawn in a game she did not understand. The fortress city loomed closer, its gates massive and imposing. Guards, clad in leather and steel, watched their approach with impassive faces. Munira's heart pounded in her chest. She had heard tales of Sheikh Nasir, a stern and solitary man, hardened by loss. He was said to be a just ruler, but also a man consumed by the memory of his first betrothed, a woman who had died in a tragic fire years ago. As the cart rumbled through the city gates, Munira caught glimpses of bustling marketplaces and narrow, winding streets. The air was thick with the scent of spices and the sounds of bartering merchants. But the whispers followed her still. People stopped to stare, their eyes lingering on her veiled face. Children pointed and giggled. Munira felt a familiar wave of shame wash over her. She was not a woman to be admired, but a spectacle, a creature to be feared and reviled. This was the welcome she received in her new home, a place that felt more like a prison than a sanctuary. The fortress walls seemed to close in around her, trapping her in a world of whispers and shadows. Sheikh Nasir stood on the balcony of his chamber, gazing out at the endless expanse of desert. The setting sun painted the dunes in hues of orange and purple, a breathtaking spectacle he barely registered. His thoughts were consumed by the past, by the memory of a fiery night that had stolen the woman he loved. He remembered her laughter, the warmth of her hand in his, the dreams they had shared, all reduced to ashes in a single, devastating blaze. He turned away from the view, his face etched with a grief he had carried for years. He was sheikh of this land, responsible for the well-being of his people. His duty demanded strength, stoicism, a leader unwavering in the face of adversity. Yet the weight of his loss pressed heavily upon him, a constant reminder of his vulnerability. Tonight he was to marry, not for love, but for duty. The bride, Munira, was said to be cursed, her face hidden behind a heavy veil. Rumors of her ugliness had spread throughout the fortress, whispers of disfigurement and ill omen. He had agreed to the marriage to appease his advisors, to maintain stability within the tribe. He expected nothing from this union but a political alliance, a necessary sacrifice. The bridal chamber was dimly lit, the flickering oil lamps casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. Munira stood before him, her veiled figure small and still. He could sense her trembling. He approached her slowly, his heart heavy with a mixture of duty and dread. He reached out, his hand hovering over the edge of her veil. He hesitated, steeling himself for the sight he expected to find beneath. Taking a deep breath, he lifted the veil. The fabric fell away, revealing a face marked by scars, a network of pale lines against her dark skin. But it was not the grotesque visage he had imagined. Instead, he saw a familiar sorrow in her eyes, a pain he recognized as his own. He traced the lines of the scars with his fingertips, his breath catching in his throat. These were not the marks of a curse, but the remnants of a fire he knew all too well. The fire that had taken his betrothed had also scarred the young girl who had pulled him from the flames, a girl he had thought perished that night. Tears welled in his eyes, blurring his vision. He looked at Munira, truly looked at her, and saw not a cursed bride, but the brave child who had saved his life. He saw the woman he had mourned for years, the woman he had believed lost forever. He reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands, his tears falling onto her scarred skin. "Munira," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "It's you." Nasir led Munira to a cushioned divan, his hand resting gently on her arm. He spoke softly, his voice still thick with emotion. "The fire," he began. "I remember a young girl, no older than 10, pulling me from the flames. She had braids adorned with beads, the same color as the sand at dawn." He looked at Munira, searching her eyes. "You had a small silver pendant, shaped like a falcon." Munira remained silent, her gaze fixed on the floor. She remembered the fire, the searing heat, the screams. She remembered pulling a man from the inferno, a man she now recognized as the Sheikh who stood before her. She remembered the pendant, a gift from her father, clutched tightly in her hand as she fled the burning building. "I searched for you," Nasir continued, his voice filled with regret. "I wanted to thank you, to repay my debt, but they told me you were gone, lost in the fire." Munira finally lifted her head, her eyes meeting his. "I survived," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But my family, they were not so fortunate." Nasir's expression softened. He reached out and took her hand, his thumb gently stroking her scarred skin. "I am so sorry, Munira. I had no idea." Munira slowly began to speak, her words hesitant at first, then gaining strength as she recounted the horrors of that night. She spoke of the fear, the confusion, the searing pain. She spoke of the loss of her family, the loneliness that followed. She spoke of the whispers, the stares, the constant reminders of her ugliness. Nasir listened patiently, his heart aching for her pain. He saw the fear in her eyes, the vulnerability she tried so hard to conceal. He saw the strength she possessed, the resilience that had allowed her to survive. He saw the woman beneath the scars, the woman he had unknowingly searched for all these years. As the night wore on, they spoke in hushed tones, sharing their memories, their fears, their hopes. They stole glances at each other, their eyes communicating a shared understanding, a connection forged in the crucible of tragedy. The vast differences in their circumstances, the sheikh and the slave bride, seemed to melt away, leaving only two souls seeking solace in each other's presence. The heavy silence that had hung between them at the beginning of the night was replaced by a quiet intimacy, a fragile bond beginning to form in the dimly lit chamber. The flickering oil lamps cast a warm glow on their faces, illuminating the shared pain and the nascent hope that flickered within their hearts. The following morning, Nasir sent for the finest silks and jewels in the city. He presented them to Munira, his eyes filled with warmth. "These are for you," he said softly, "a small token of my respect." Munira hesitated, her fingers tracing the delicate embroidery on a silken robe. She was accustomed to rough-spun cloth, to garments meant to hide, not adorn. She had never owned anything so beautiful. I don't deserve these," she stammered. Nasir gently took her hand. "You deserve more than this, Munira. You saved my life. You are a woman of courage and strength." He insisted she wear the silks, and when she emerged from her chamber, she was transformed. The rich colors brought out the warmth of her skin, and the jewels sparkled against her dark hair. The scars remained, but they no longer seemed to define her. She carried herself with a newfound confidence, a quiet dignity that commanded attention. Nasir watched her with pride, his heart swelling with affection. He took her arm and led her to the breakfast table, where his advisers and household staff were gathered. A hush fell over the room as they entered. Whispers rippled through the assembled crowd, their eyes lingering on Munira's scarred face. Nasir squeezed her hand reassuringly. "This is Munira," he announced, his voice clear and strong. "My wife." He then proceeded to recount the story of the fire, how Munira had bravely saved him from the flames. He spoke of her courage, her selflessness, her unwavering spirit. He challenged those who whispered behind their hands, reminding them that true beauty lies not in outward appearance, but in the goodness of one's heart. Some of his advisers listened with respect, their faces softening with admiration. Others remained skeptical, their eyes filled with suspicion. They had heard the rumors of Munira's ugliness, and they feared her scars were a bad omen. Later that day, Nasir took Munira for a walk through the fortress gardens. He showed her the fragrant jasmine bushes, the cascading fountains, the colorful birds that flitted among the trees. He pointed out the distant mountains, their peaks capped with snow. He spoke of the history of his people, their traditions, their dreams. Munira listened intently, her heart slowly opening to the beauty that surrounded her. She had spent so long hidden in shadows, afraid to show her face, that she had forgotten the simple joys of life. Nasir's kindness, his gentle touch, his unwavering belief in her were slowly chipping away at the wall of fear she had built around herself. As they walked, Nasir picked a single jasmine blossom and tucked it behind Munira's ear. "You are beautiful, Munira," he whispered, his eyes locking with hers. "More beautiful than you know." Munira blushed, her heart fluttering in her chest. No one had ever spoken to her with such tenderness, such genuine affection. She felt a warmth spreading through her, a feeling she had not experienced in years. It was the feeling of being seen, of being valued, of being loved. In that moment, the scars on her face seemed to fade, replaced by the radiant glow of hope. Munira awoke to the sound of birdsong, a melody she hadn't truly heard in years. The sun streamed through the chamber window, painting the stone walls in warm hues of gold. She rose and dressed, choosing a simple gown from the silks Nasir had gifted her. She no longer felt the urge to hide beneath layers of fabric. Nasir's kindness had begun to heal the wounds that ran deeper than any scar. She found him in the courtyard, practicing swordplay with his guards. He moved with a fluid grace, his body strong and agile. He caught her eye and smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. He dismissed his guards and approached her, his hand outstretched. "Good morning, Munira," he said warmly. "Did you sleep well?" Munira nodded, her cheeks flushing slightly. "Yes, thank you." They spent the morning together, walking through the bustling marketplace. Nasir introduced her to the merchants and townspeople, his hand resting protectively on her arm. He treated her with respect, with honor, as if she were the most beautiful woman in the world. The stares and whispers still followed them, but they held less power now. Munira held her head high, her gaze steady. She would not let their fear and ignorance diminish her. Later that day, Munira heard a commotion coming from the village just outside the fortress walls. A child had fallen ill, and his mother was frantic. Munira, remembering her own training in herbal remedies from her grandmother, felt a surge of compassion. She excused herself from Nasir and hurried towards the village. She found the child burning with fever, his small body racked with coughs. His mother sat beside him, her face etched with worry. Munira knelt beside the child, her gentle touch soothing his cries. She examined him carefully, her knowledge of herbs guiding her diagnosis. She instructed the mother to gather specific plants from the nearby hills, describing their appearance and properties with precision. While the mother was gone, Munira bathed the child's forehead with cool water, humming a soft lullaby. She spoke to him in soothing tones, her voice calming his fears. When the mother returned with the herbs, Munira prepared a poultice and applied it to the child's chest. She brewed a tea from the remaining herbs, coaxing the child to sip it slowly. Within hours, the child's fever began to subside, his breathing becoming more regular. The mother wept with relief, her gratitude overflowing. News of Munira's healing touch spread quickly through the village. People who had once shunned her now approached her with respect, their eyes filled with admiration. They brought her gifts of fruit and flowers, tokens of their appreciation. Munira accepted their offerings with humility, her heart filled with a quiet joy. That evening, Nasir found her in the gardens, tending to a small patch of herbs she had planted. He watched her for a moment, his heart filled with pride. He saw the compassion in her eyes, the strength that radiated from her. He saw the woman she truly was, a woman of kindness, resilience, and unwavering spirit. He approached her and took her hand, his thumb gently stroking her scarred skin. "I heard about what you did in the village today," he said softly. "You have a gift, Munira." "A gift for healing." Munira looked at him, her eyes shining with a newfound confidence. "It is not a gift," she replied. "It is a responsibility. We all have a responsibility to help those in need." Nasir smiled, his heart swelling with affection. He pulled her close, his arms encircling her waist. He rested his chin on her head, inhaling the scent of jasmine that clung to her hair. "You are remarkable, Munira," he whispered, "truly remarkable." In that moment, their bond deepened, strengthened by a shared understanding, a mutual respect, and a love that was slowly blossoming in the heart of the desert. Vizier Farhan watched from the shadows as Nasir and Munira walked hand in hand through the marketplace. His thin lips curled into a sneer. He had expected Nasir to be repulsed by the scarred woman, to cast her aside in disgust. Instead, the Sheikh seemed captivated by her, treating her with a tenderness Farhan had never witnessed before. This was not part of his plan. Farhan had orchestrated Munira's sale to Nasir as a means of humiliation, a way to weaken the Sheikh's authority and sow discord within the tribe. He resented Nasir's power, the respect he commanded from the people. He craved that power for himself. He believed he was the rightful leader, a man of intellect and cunning, far superior to the sentimental Nasir. He approached a group of elders, his voice dripping with false concern. "Have you seen the Sheikh's new bride?" he asked, his eyes wide with feigned shock. "Such a tragedy, such a disfigurement. Surely these scars are a bad omen, a curse upon our tribe." The elders murmured amongst themselves, their faces etched with worry. Farhan continued, his voice growing louder. "The spirits are angered. They will bring misfortune upon us, drought, famine, disease. We must appease them. We must rid ourselves of this cursed woman." He planted the seeds of fear and doubt, watching them take root in the minds of the elders. He knew how easily fear could spread, how quickly it could turn into panic. He had used this tactic before, manipulating the tribe to his own advantage. Later that day, he sought out Nasir's younger brother, a man known for his ambition and his susceptibility to flattery. He filled the young man's head with tales of Munira's ugliness, her supposed curse, and the threat she posed to the tribe's prosperity. He hinted at the possibility of Nasir's removal, of a new leader, a younger, stronger leader who would listen to the wisdom of his advisors. He left the young man with a gift, a finely crafted dagger, its hilt inlaid with precious stones. "A token of my esteem," he said smoothly, "a symbol of the power that could be yours." Farhan returned to his chambers, a satisfied smirk playing on his lips. His plan was unfolding perfectly. He would turn the tribe against Munira, force Nasir to annul the marriage, and then, with the support of Nasir's ambitious brother, he would seize control. He would be the sheikh, the ruler of this land, the one who held the power. He imagined himself seated on Nasir's throne, the people bowing before him, his word law. He closed his eyes, savoring the taste of victory. Farhan chose the midday meal to unveil the next stage of his plan. The grand hall of the fortress buzzed with activity as servants carried platters laden with roasted meats, fragrant rice, and sweet dates. Nasir sat at the head of the long table, Munira beside him. She was still adjusting to the curious stares and hushed whispers, but Nasir's presence gave her strength. Farhan entered the hall, his daughter Layla on his arm. Layla was indeed beautiful, with smooth, unblemished skin, dark, kohl-rimmed eyes, and a cascade of raven hair. She wore a gown of shimmering gold, a stark contrast to Munira's simple attire. Farhan presented Layla to the assembled crowd, his voice booming through the hall. "Behold Layla, my daughter, a flower of the desert, a jewel of our tribe." He turned to Nasir, his eyes gleaming. "A fitting bride for a sheikh, a woman of beauty and purity, untouched by misfortune." He gestured towards Munira, his voice dripping with false concern. "The spirits frown upon scarred flesh, Sheikh. They demand purity, beauty, a bride who will bring blessings, not curses upon our people." Nasir's jaw tightened. He glanced at Munira, her eyes downcast. He could feel the weight of the tribe's expectations, the pressure to conform, to choose duty over his growing affection for the woman beside him. Farhan pressed his advantage. "The tribe needs a strong leader, Sheikh. A leader who will heed the wisdom of his advisors, a leader who will choose the path of prosperity, not the path of superstition." He lowered his voice, his words laced with veiled threat. "The people are restless, Sheikh. They fear the whispers, the omens. They need reassurance, a sign that their leader will protect them from harm." Nasir stood, his chair scraping against the stone floor. He looked at Farhan, his eyes blazing with anger. "My wife is not a curse, Vizier. She is a survivor, a woman of courage and strength. She saved my life, and I will not abandon her to appease your superstitious fears." He turned to Munira, his gaze softening. He took her hand, his thumb gently stroking her scarred skin. "I choose Munira," he declared, his voice ringing through the hall. "I choose love over fear. I choose compassion over cruelty." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some nodded in approval, their faces filled with admiration for Nasir's courage. Others shook their heads, their eyes filled with doubt and apprehension. Farhan's smile vanished. His plan was not going as smoothly as he had hoped. Nasir's defiance, his public declaration of affection for Munira, had thrown a wrench into his carefully crafted scheme. He glared at Nasir, his eyes burning with resentment. "You will regret this, Sheikh," he hissed. "You will regret choosing this cursed woman over the well-being of your tribe." He turned and stalked out of the hall, his daughter trailing behind him. The tension in the room remained, thick and heavy, a silent battle brewing between duty and desire, tradition and change. The conflict between Nasir and Farhan had escalated, and the fate of the tribe hung in the balance. The whispers started subtly, like the desert wind rustling through dry leaves. Then they grew louder, more insistent, spreading through the fortress city like wildfire. Farhan's words, laced with poison, had taken root. People began to avoid Munira, their eyes filled with fear and suspicion. Children pointed and whispered as she passed. The gifts of fruit and flowers stopped coming. The elders, once respectful, now greeted her with strained politeness, their gazes lingering on her scars. They spoke of ill omens, of crops failing, of livestock dying, They blamed Munira, the scarred bride, the cursed woman. They pressured Nasir to reconsider his decision, to choose the well-being of the tribe over his personal affections. Nasir remained steadfast in his defense of Munira. He reminded the elders of her kindness, her courage, her healing touch. He spoke of the fire, how she had saved his life, how she had risked her own safety to help others, but his words seemed to fall on deaf ears. Fear had taken hold, and reason no longer prevailed. Even Nasir's younger brother, swayed by Farhan's promises of power, turned against him. He spoke openly of Munira's curse, echoing Farhan's words of doom and gloom. He rallied support among the younger members of the tribe, those eager for change, those susceptible to the allure of ambition. Munira felt the weight of their fear, the burden of their accusations. She withdrew into herself, seeking solace in the quiet of her chamber. The scars on her face, once a badge of courage, now felt like a mark of shame. She began to doubt herself, to question Nasir's unwavering belief in her. Was she truly cursed? Was she bringing misfortune upon the tribe? Nasir sensed her withdrawal, the growing despair in her eyes. He tried to comfort her, to reassure her of his love and support. But the whispers had created a chasm between them, a barrier of fear and suspicion. They were isolated, surrounded by a tribe that had turned against them. The fortress, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. The walls seemed to close in around them, trapping them in a world of whispers and shadows. The desert wind, once a comforting sound, now carried the whispers of fear and doubt, a constant reminder of their isolation. Nasir and Munira, once united by a shared tragedy, now faced a new challenge, a battle against the fear that threatened to tear them apart. Munira sat alone in her chamber, the whispers echoing in her mind. Cursed, omen, outcast. The words stung, reopening old wounds. She wrapped her arms around herself, seeking a comfort she couldn't find. Nasir's kindness had been a balm, a soothing touch on a scarred heart. But now, even his unwavering support seemed to falter under the weight of the tribe's fear. She closed her eyes, trying to block out the whispers, to find a quiet space within herself. As she did, the memories of the fire returned, vivid and searing. She remembered the heat, the smoke, the screams. She remembered her father's strong hand holding hers as they fled the burning building. She remembered the crackle of flames, the crash of timbers, the choking smell of burning wood. A particular detail surfaced, a flicker of memory that had been buried beneath years of pain and trauma. She remembered seeing a figure just outside their home before the fire erupted. A tall, cloaked figure watching the flames with a strange, almost satisfied expression. She hadn't thought much of it at the time, her mind consumed by the terror of the moment. But now, with Farhan's constant whispers of curses and omens echoing in her ears, a chilling thought took root. Could Farhan have been the one who set the fire? The thought seemed impossible, outrageous. But the more she considered it, the more the pieces began to fall into place. Farhan's resentment towards Nasir, his constant attempts to undermine him, his sudden appearance with his beautiful daughter, all pointed towards a deeper, more sinister motive. She remembered a small silver pendant shaped like a falcon, a gift from her father. She had clutched it tightly in her hand as she escaped the flames. It had been charred black by the fire, but she had kept it, a tangible link to her lost family. She had tucked it away years ago, unable to bear the pain of its memory. With a newfound determination, Munira rose and crossed the room to a small wooden chest. Her hands trembled as she lifted the lid, revealing a collection of trinkets and keepsakes from her childhood. She sifted through them, her heart pounding with anticipation. And then, there it was, nestled amongst the faded ribbons and dried flowers. The pendant was small, barely larger than her thumb. The silver had blackened with the fire, but the shape of the falcon was still discernible. As she held it in her hand, another memory surfaced, a glint of metal in the firelight, a crest on the cloak of the figure standing outside her burning home. She couldn't be certain, but she thought it resembled the crest of Farhan's family, a stylized scorpion. Munira clutched the pendant tightly, her mind racing. If she could prove that Farhan was involved in the fire, she could expose his treachery and clear her name. She could protect Nasir, the man who had shown her kindness and respect when no one else would. She could silence the whispers and reclaim her life. She knew she had to be careful. Farhan was powerful, and he had the support of many within the tribe. She needed proof, solid evidence that would convince even the most skeptical of his guilt. She hid the pendant beneath her robes, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. She would uncover the truth no matter the cost. She would not let Farhan's lies destroy her or the man she was growing to love. The whispers would not silence her. She would fight back. Nasir noticed a change in Munira. The light that had begun to flicker in her eyes had dimmed, replaced by a shadow of fear and doubt. He saw her withdrawing, seeking solace in the quiet corners of the fortress, her laughter silenced, her gaze downcast. He knew the whispers were taking their toll, poisoning the well of kindness he had carefully nurtured within her. He found her in the gardens one evening, sitting beneath the shade of a date palm, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. He sat beside her, his hand resting gently on her arm. "Munira," he said softly, "what troubles you?" She looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and fear. "The whispers, Nasir," she whispered. "They say I am cursed, that I bring misfortune upon your tribe." Nasir's jaw tightened. He pulled her close, his arms encircling her protectively. "They are wrong, Munira. You are not a curse. You are a blessing." He looked into her eyes, his gaze unwavering. "I will not let them hurt you. I will uncover the truth behind Farhan's animosity. I will prove that he is the one who sows discord, not you." That night, Nasir began his investigation. He sought out the elders who had served his father, men he knew to be loyal and trustworthy. He questioned them about the fire that had taken his first betrothed, the fire that had scarred Munira. He asked about Farhan, his role in the court, his relationship with his father. The elders spoke cautiously, their voices low. They confirmed Farhan's ambition, his desire for power. They spoke of rumors, whispers of Farhan's involvement in shady dealings, of alliances with unsavory characters outside the tribe. They revealed that Farhan had been the one to suggest the marriage between Nasir and his first betrothed, a woman from a powerful neighboring tribe. The alliance had been advantageous for Farhan, solidifying his position in the court and increasing his influence over Nasir's father. Nasir listened intently, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to fit together. He remembered Farhan's eagerness to arrange his marriage to Munira, his insistence that she was a suitable bride. He remembered the look in Farhan's eyes when he had declared his love for Munira, a look not of disappointment, but of thwarted ambition. He sought out the guards who had been on duty the night of the fire. He questioned them about the circumstances, the sequence of events, any unusual occurrences they might have witnessed. One of the guards, an old man with a weathered face and keen eyes, hesitated before speaking. He recalled seeing a figure lurking near the stables just before the fire broke out, a tall, cloaked figure he couldn't identify. Nasir pressed him for more details. The guard described the figure's cloak, the crest it bore, a stylized scorpion, the crest of Farhan's family. Nasir's heart sank. The guard's testimony, combined with the elders' accounts and Farhan's suspicious behavior, painted a grim picture. He returned to his chambers, his mind racing. He now had a clearer understanding of Farhan's motives, his long-standing resentment, his carefully orchestrated plan to seize power. He realized that Munira was not merely a pawn in Farhan's game, but a victim, a scapegoat used to further his own ambitions. He knew he had to act quickly to protect Munira, to expose Farhan's treachery, and to restore balance to his tribe. He would not let Farhan's lies prevail. He would fight for Munira, for his tribe, for the truth. Munira held the charred pendant in her trembling hand. The blackened silver obscured much of the detail, but as she angled it in the lamplight, she saw it. A tiny, almost indistinguishable scorpion, the crest of Farhan's family etched into the metal. Her heart pounded in her chest. Her suspicions were confirmed. Farhan had been there, at her family's home on the night of the fire. She knew she had to tell Nasir. He would know what to do. She wrapped the pendant in a scrap of silk and hurried to his chambers. She found him poring over scrolls, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked up as she entered, his expression softening. "Munira," he said, "what is it?" She held out the pendant, her hand still shaking. "I found this," she whispered. "It was my father's. He gave it to me when I was a child." Nasir took the pendant, his fingers carefully tracing the outline of the falcon. He noticed the blackened silver, the barely visible scorpion. His eyes widened in recognition. "This crest," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "It's Farhan's." Munira recounted her memories of the fire, the cloaked figure standing outside her home, the glint of metal in the firelight. She told him of her suspicions, her growing certainty of Farhan's involvement. Nasir listened intently, his expression hardening with each word. He then shared his own findings, the elders' accounts of Farhan's ambition, the guard's testimony about the cloaked figure with the scorpion crest. He explained how Farhan had orchestrated his first betrothal, how he had benefited from the alliance, how he had gained power and influence within the tribe. "He set the fire, Munira," Nasir said, his voice filled with a quiet fury. "He killed my betrothed. He destroyed your family. And he used your scars, the tragedy he himself created, to turn the tribe against you." He paced the room, his mind racing. "He wanted to humiliate me, to weaken my authority. He wanted to sow discord, to create chaos, so that he could seize control." He stopped, turning to Munira, his eyes filled with determination. "We have to expose him, Munira. We have to show the tribe the truth." Munira nodded, her fear replaced by a newfound resolve. "I will stand with you, Nasir," she said, her voice firm. "We will bring him to justice." They looked at each other, their eyes locked in a shared understanding. They were no longer isolated individuals, burdened by whispers and shadows. They were allies, united in their pursuit of justice, their shared determination to uncover the truth and restore balance to their tribe. The pendant, once a symbol of loss and pain, now represented hope, a key to unlocking the truth and exposing the darkness that had plagued their lives for so long. Nasir and Munira knew they needed more than the pendant, and a few fragmented memories to convince the tribe of Farhan's guilt. They needed irrefutable proof, evidence that would silence even the most ardent of Farhan's supporters. They began their work in secret, meeting in the quiet hours before dawn, their plans whispered in hushed tones. Munira, with her knowledge of the fortress and its inhabitants, proved to be an invaluable asset. She remembered overhearing conversations, observing subtle gestures, noticing patterns of behavior that had escaped Nasir's attention. She recalled a particular merchant, a man named Omar, who had always seemed uneasy in Farhan's presence. She remembered Omar speaking of debts, of threats, of a forced alliance with the vizier. Nasir sought out Omar, approaching him discreetly in the bustling marketplace. He spoke of Farhan's manipulative tactics, his exploitation of the tribe's resources, his veiled threats against those who dared to question his authority. Omar hesitated at first, his eyes darting nervously around the crowded square. But Nasir's sincerity, his genuine concern for the well-being of the tribe, eventually won him over. Omar confessed that Farhan had forced him to smuggle goods into the city, bypassing the usual taxes and enriching the vizier's coffers. He revealed that Farhan had threatened to ruin his business, to destroy his family, if he refused to cooperate. He produced a ledger, hidden beneath a loose floorboard in his shop, detailing the illegal transactions, the dates, the amounts, the names of those involved. It was a damning piece of evidence, proof of Farhan's corruption and his abuse of power. Munira, meanwhile, sought out a young woman named Zara, a servant in Farhan's household. Zara had always treated Munira with kindness, her eyes filled with sympathy, not fear. Munira confided in Zara, sharing her suspicions about Farhan's involvement in the fire. Zara listened intently, her expression hardening with each word. Zara confirmed that Farhan had been unusually agitated in the days leading up to the fire. She remembered him leaving the fortress late at night, cloaked and hooded, his movements secretive and furtive. She recalled overhearing a whispered conversation between Farhan and his brother, a conversation filled with veiled threats and ominous pronouncements. She couldn't make out the specifics, but the tone had been unsettling, filled with a chilling malice. Nasir and Munira shared their findings, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. They now had a network of allies, individuals who had been wronged by Farhan, individuals who were willing to risk their own safety to expose his treachery. They met in secret, planning their strategy, preparing for the confrontation that would determine the fate of their tribe. They knew they faced a powerful adversary, a man who would stop at nothing to maintain his grip on power. But they were no longer alone. They had the truth on their side, and they had the support of those who believed in them. They were ready to fight. The desert sun beat down upon the fortress city, casting long shadows across the courtyard. Nasir stood before the assembled tribe, his voice ringing with authority. He held the charred pendant aloft, the small, blackened falcon glinting in the sunlight. "This," he declared, "belonged to Munira's father. It was recovered from the ashes of their home, the home that Farhan destroyed." He turned to Farhan, his gaze piercing. "Vizier Farhan," he said, his voice laced with controlled fury, "you stand accused of setting the fire that killed my betrothed and Munira's family. You stand accused of using this tragedy to manipulate the tribe, to sow discord, and to further your own ambitions." He presented the ledger Omar had provided, the detailed record of Farhan's illegal dealings. He recounted Zara's testimony, her account of Farhan's secretive movements, his whispered threats. He spoke of the guard's recollection, the cloaked figure with the scorpion crest lurking near the stables just before the fire erupted. He pointed to the barely visible scorpion etched into the pendant, a silent testament to Farhan's presence at the scene of the crime. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The elders exchanged uneasy glances. Farhan's supporters shifted nervously, their faces pale with apprehension. Farhan himself remained impassive, his expression carefully controlled. "These are lies," he said smoothly, his voice calm and measured. "Fabrications designed to discredit me, to undermine my authority. This pendant proves nothing. The scorpion crest is a common symbol. Anyone could have placed it there." He dismissed Omar's testimony as the ramblings of a disgruntled merchant, a man seeking revenge for a perceived slight. He discredited Zara's account, claiming she was a disloyal servant, eager to please the Sheikh with fabricated stories. He cast doubt on the guard's memory, suggesting that age and failing eyesight had clouded his judgment. "I have served this tribe faithfully for decades," Farhan continued, his voice rising in righteous indignation. "I have always acted in its best interests. I would never betray the trust placed in me. These accusations are absurd, preposterous. They are the desperate attempts of a desperate man, a sheikh clinging to power by any means necessary. He turned to the tribe, his arms outstretched in a gesture of supplication. "Do not believe these lies," he implored. "Do not let yourselves be swayed by the whispers of a scarred woman and a power-hungry sheikh. I am innocent. I demand justice." A tense silence hung in the air. The tribe was divided, torn between their loyalty to Farhan and their growing unease at the mounting evidence against him. Nasir and Farhan stood facing each other, their gazes locked in a silent battle of wills. The fate of the tribe, the future of their land, hung in the balance. Munira stepped forward, her hand trembling slightly as she reached up and removed her veil. The gasps from the assembled tribe were audible. Some recoiled, their eyes widening at the sight of her scars. Others looked at her with a newfound respect, recognizing the courage it took to reveal her face in such a public setting. She looked directly at Farhan, her gaze unwavering. "Vizier Farhan," she said, her voice clear and strong, "you say these are lies. You say I am a scarred woman whispering falsehoods, but I was there that night. I saw you." She recounted the events of the fire, the terror, the confusion, the searing pain. She described her escape, her father's hand in hers, the desperate scramble for safety. Then she spoke of the figure she had seen just before the fire erupted. The tall, cloaked figure standing outside her home, watching the flames with a chilling detachment. "I saw your face, Farhan," she said, her voice rising with emotion. "You were there. You watched as my home burned. You watched as my family perished. You watched as I, a child, barely escaped with my life." She held up the charred pendant, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. "This pendant, the one you claim proves nothing, bears your family's crest. It was clutched in my hand as I fled the flames you set." She turned to the tribe, her voice filled with a quiet power. "He did this," she declared, her finger pointing directly at Farhan. "He set the fire. He killed Nasir's betrothed. He destroyed my family. He is the curse upon this tribe, not I." The silence that followed was deafening. The tribe watched, mesmerized, as the scarred woman, once an object of fear and revulsion, transformed into a symbol of courage and truth. Farhan's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. The confident smirk vanished, replaced by a look of panic. His supporters averted their gazes, their faces etched with shame and disbelief. Nasir stepped forward, his hand resting gently on Munira's arm. He looked at Farhan, his eyes blazing with righteous anger. "Confess, Farhan," he demanded, his voice booming through the courtyard. "Confess your crimes and beg the forgiveness of this tribe." Farhan's composure finally broke. He stammered, his words disjointed and incoherent. He tried to deny, to deflect, to maintain the illusion of innocence. But Munira's testimony, combined with the mounting evidence Nasir had presented, was too much to overcome. The truth, like the flames he had set so many years ago, consumed him. He sank to his knees, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "I did it," he confessed, his voice barely a whisper. "I set the fire. I killed Nasir's betrothed. I wanted the power. I wanted to be Sheikh." A collective gasp rose from the tribe. The truth, so long hidden in shadows, had finally been revealed. Farhan's confession, a dramatic and devastating admission of guilt, echoed through the courtyard, marking the end of his reign of deceit and the beginning of a new era for the tribe. The elders, their faces grim, conferred briefly. Then, the eldest amongst them stepped forward, his voice heavy with the weight of his judgment. "Farhan," he declared, "for your crimes against this tribe, for the lives you have taken, for the pain you have caused, you are banished. You are to leave this land and never return." Two guards stepped forward and seized Farhan by the arms. He offered no resistance, his spirit broken, his ambition turned to ash. He was led away, his head bowed in shame, his reign of deceit finally at an end. Nasir turned to Munira, his eyes filled with admiration and love. He took her hand, raising it for all to see. "Munira," he said, his voice ringing with emotion, "you are a woman of extraordinary courage and resilience. You have faced unimaginable hardship, yet your spirit remains unbroken. You have endured the whispers, the stares, the accusations, yet your kindness and compassion never wavered." He traced the lines of her scars with his fingertips, his voice filled with tenderness. "These scars," he declared, "are not marks of shame but symbols of honor. They are a testament to your strength, your resilience, your unwavering spirit. They are a reminder of the fire that tried to consume you but failed. They are a symbol of your triumph over adversity." He turned to the assembled tribe, his voice filled with conviction. "Munira saved my life," he announced. "She healed the sick. She comforted the grieving. She spoke truth to power. She is not a curse, but a blessing. She is not an outcast, but a hero." He looked at Munira, his eyes shining with love. "Today, I formally take you as my wife, not as a pawn in a political game, but as the woman I love, the woman who has captured my heart." A cheer erupted from the crowd. The elders, their faces now beaming with approval, offered their blessings. The women, who had once whispered behind their hands, now clapped and cheered, their eyes filled with admiration. The children, who had once pointed and stared, now showered Munira with flowers, their faces bright with smiles. The courtyard was transformed into a scene of celebration. Colorful banners were unfurled, musicians played lively melodies, and dancers twirled and swayed to the rhythm of the drums. Munira, dressed in a gown of shimmering white, stood beside Nasir, her hand clasped tightly in his. She no longer felt the weight of their stares, the sting of their whispers. She felt only the warmth of Nasir's love, the acceptance of the tribe, the joy of being finally free. The ceremony was simple but profound. Nasir and Munira exchanged vows, their words echoing through the courtyard, a testament to their love, their resilience, and their shared commitment to a brighter future. They were no longer the sheikh and the slave bride, but husband and wife, partners in leadership, united in their love for each other and their dedication to their people. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the fortress city, Munira, the scarred bride, the woman once called too ugly to touch, became Sheikh Munira, a symbol of hope and resilience, a beacon of light in the heart of the desert. The charred remnants of the village outside the fortress walls stood as a stark reminder of Farhan's cruelty. Nasir and Munira, hand in hand, surveyed the damage. The air was thick with the smell of burnt wood and the silence of loss. But amidst the devastation, a new spirit was stirring, a spirit of hope and resilience. Nasir, with the full support of his tribe, pledged to rebuild. He organized the work, assigning tasks, ensuring everyone had a role to play. He led by example, his strong hands lifting heavy stones, his voice encouraging those who faltered. But it was Munira who truly inspired the people. She moved among them, her scarred face no longer a source of fear, but a beacon of hope. She spoke to the families who had lost their homes, offering comfort and reassurance. She shared her own story of survival, her voice filled with a quiet strength that resonated with those who had suffered. She reminded them that even from the ashes, new life could bloom. Munira's knowledge of herbs and healing proved invaluable. She tended to the injured, soothing their burns with gentle hands and potent remedies. She taught the women how to prepare healing salves and tonics, empowering them to care for their families. She established a small clinic, a place of healing and solace for those who bore the visible and invisible scars of the fire. She became a confidant, a counselor, a source of strength for those who had once shunned her. The women who had once whispered behind their hands now sought her advice, her wisdom, her unwavering compassion. The children, who had once pointed and stared, now flocked to her side, drawn to her gentle touch and her kind smile. The village rose from the ashes, stronger and more beautiful than before. New homes were built, using stone and timber salvaged from the wreckage. Gardens were planted, bursting with vibrant colors and fragrant blooms. The marketplace bustled with activity, the sounds of laughter and bartering filling the air. The scars of the fire remained, but they were now a part of the village's story, a reminder of their resilience, their unity, their shared strength. Munira, once a slave bride, became Sheikh Munira, a beloved leader, a symbol of hope for the entire tribe. Her ugliness transformed into a beacon of resilience, a testament to the power of the human spirit to overcome adversity. She established a support network for burn survivors, creating a safe space for them to share their stories, their struggles, their triumphs. She taught them to embrace their scars, to see them not as marks of shame, but as symbols of survival. Under Nasir and Munira's leadership, the tribe flourished. Peace and prosperity reigned. The whispers of fear and doubt were replaced by songs of joy and celebration. The desert, once a symbol of hardship and isolation, now bloomed with life, nourished by the love and compassion that flowed from the heart of the rebuilt village. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the desert sky in hues of orange and purple, Nasir and Munira sat together on the balcony of their chamber. They looked out at the village below, the lights twinkling like stars in the gathering darkness. Nasir took Munira's hand, his thumb gently stroking her scarred skin. "We have come a long way, haven't we?" he said softly. Munira smiled, her eyes shining with love and gratitude. "Yes," she replied, "we have." "You taught me the true meaning of strength, Munira," Nasir continued, his gaze locking with hers. "You showed me that true beauty lies not in outward appearance, but in the goodness of one's heart." Munira leaned her head against his shoulder, her heart filled with a quiet joy. "And you," she whispered, "you showed me that even the deepest scars can be healed by love and acceptance." They sat in silence for a moment, their hands clasped tightly together, their hearts beating as one. The desert wind whispered through the palm trees, a gentle lullaby, a testament to the peace and prosperity that had finally come to their land. They had faced adversity, endured hardship, and overcome the darkness that had threatened to consume them. Together, they had rebuilt not only their village, but also their lives. Their love a beacon of hope, a testament to the strength they found in each other.